Wyoming Territory, 1882. The train pulled into the dusty station at Laramie just past noon, and no one stepped forward to welcome the tall woman in the blue traveling coat as she climbed down alone. Vera Allendale stood nearly 6 feet in her boots, her wide-set green eyes scanning the platform. She clutched a folded letter in one hand, the kind sent in response to an ad in the back of the Boston Weekly. But there was no sign of the man who had written it. No Jacob, no bouquet, no smile. Just a breeze tugging at her skirts and a station clerk who gave her a sideways look before tipping his hat and walking off. She stood straighter, jaw set. This was not the first time she had been judged too much, too tall, too opinionated, too unwilling to shrink herself. But it was the first time she had traveled over 1,000 miles to be rejected on sight. He had taken one look from down the platform, her height unmistakable, and turned right around. She had seen it. A man with a red kerchief, hat in hand, eyes widening before he walked away. Vera folded the letter once more and tucked it back into her satchel. Well, she said out loud to no one, that makes 4. She walked from the station toward town, her boots kicking up dust. The streets were busy, wagons rumbling by, cowhands calling to one another, but Vera walked through it all like she had somewhere to be. She did not. Not anymore. She found a room above the mercantile, plain and clean, with a bed and a window that looked out over the edge of the prairie. She sat on the edge of the mattress and let herself feel it for a minute, the sting of it. She had hoped this would be different. She had not expected love. But she had expected decency. By morning, she was at the dressmaker's asking after work. By the end of the week, she was doing inventory for the general store, her long arms a help when lifting crates. She met people. Smiled. Did not explain herself. The town whispered, but she ignored it. Then one afternoon, as summer leaned toward autumn and the air turned sharp, a man walked into the store, brushing hay from his coat and looking like he had ridden hard. He was tall, not as tall as her, but close, with sun-darkened skin, stubble on his jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds just before rain. His voice was low, and even when he asked, "You Vera Allendale?" she straightened. Yes. He looked her up and down, not with the usual glance of surprise, but with something steadier. Curious. Measuring. I am Nolan Hartley, he said. My sister runs the post. She told me about what happened at the station. Vera's mouth tightened. That is not a story I care to repeat. He nodded once. Fair. She waited, brow lifted. And? I have a ranch west of here. Not looking for a bride. He paused, then added, but I am looking for someone honest, who can read, write, and is not afraid of hard work. Vera crossed her arms. So you came into town to hire a woman? I came into town to meet the woman who got stood up for being taller than the man who sent for her. His gaze held hers. And I thought maybe she is the kind who does not scare easy. She tilted her head. And if she is, then I would like to offer her work. Room. Board. Respect. Vera studied him. He did not smile to charm her. He did not flinch when she stepped closer. And his eyes, they stayed on hers, not dropping once to her boots like most men did. I will come for a week, she said. No promises. Fair enough, Nolan said and tipped his hat. The next morning he was there with his wagon. The ranch was a good half-day west of town, tucked in a wide valley with cottonwoods along a creek and a red barn that needed paint. There were fences to fix, chickens to feed, and a little girl with wild curls and bare feet who ran out from behind the porch shouting, Papa. Nolan scooped her up. This is Vada. My daughter. Vera blinked. You did not mention a child. I do not mention a lot of things until I know someone is staying. Vada stared at her with curious eyes. You are very tall. Vera laughed. Yes, I am. You are like a tree. I like that. Vera met Nolan's gaze over the child's head. His mouth twitched. She's honest. I can appreciate that, Vera said. She stayed the week. Then another. She helped with the ledgers, taught Vada to read her letters in the evenings, and helped Nolan mend the paddock fence after a storm brought part of it down. At night, she sat on the porch with him, watching the sky fade to purple. He was not a man of many words, but he listened. He asked. He noticed. You had someone? She asked once. He nodded. Vada's mother died in the second winter. Fever took her fast. I am sorry. I was too, he said softly. Still am. But life keeps going. She looked down. My family stopped writing after the first ad I placed. Said I was embarrassing them. That is their loss, he said. She looked up at him then. Really looked. His face was rough, but his eyes were kind. You do not look at me the way others do, she said. I do not see what they see, he said. What do you see? I see a woman who works harder than most men I know. A woman who does not flinch when a horse bucks or a child cries. A woman who never lies. Vera's throat tightened. Nolan reached out, brushing her knuckles with his. You are tall, he said. But that just means I do not have to bend down to kiss you. Her breath caught. I am not looking for a house girl, he said. Or a pity match. But if you stay, if you want more than work. She reached for his hand, fingers wrapping around his. I want more, she said. He leaned in, slow, and kissed her there, under the wide Wyoming sky, with the wind soft around them and the porch creaking beneath their boots. And for the first time in a long time, Vera Allendale did not feel like too much. She felt just right. Vera stepped down from the porch before first light, the hem of her skirt brushing dew from the grass. Nolan had already saddled the gelding, its breath clouding in the chilled morning air. She took the reins without a word, swung up smooth, and followed him toward the lower pasture where a section of fencing had gone slack overnight. They rode in silence until the sun cleared the ridgeline. Nolan halted near the creek, dismounted, and knelt to examine the post footing. Vera tied off her horse and joined him, crouching opposite. Frost heaved it, he said, pressing a hand to the soil. Won't hold another season. We'll need cedar, she said, and gravel to pack it tight. He looked up. You know post setting? My uncle kept goats east of Concord. Always needed fencing mended. Nolan nodded, then stood. I'll haul up what we need after the herd's checked. You mind starting the holes? I'll need the auger. In the barn, hanging beside the saw. Vera turned toward the rise, but Nolan caught her arm lightly. If you get tired, I won't. He let go, and she walked uphill, the wind tugging at her braid. By midday, the sun cut through the chill. Vera stripped off her overshirt, rolled her sleeves, and worked the auger into the hard-packed earth, her palms blistering but steady. She didn't look up when Nolan returned with the wagon load. She only straightened when he handed her a tin cup of water. You beat me to the third. You were slow. He huffed through his nose, but there was no offense in it. He set down the gravel sacks and crouched beside the nearest post hole, inspecting the depth. Even, he said. She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist. I know. That night, Vada sat cross-legged on the cabin floor, piecing together quilt squares from a basket of old calicos. Vera watched her from the stove, where cornmeal biscuits browned in the cast-iron pan. Nolan came in from the barn, shaking straw from his sleeves. She's good at keeping her seams straight, Vera said, nodding toward the girl. She likes patterns, he replied, removing his hat. Says they feel like maps. Vada looked up. They are maps. Just not the kind you ride with. Nolan chuckled low in his throat, and Vera felt something small and warm shift in her chest. She plated the biscuits and set them on the table. Later, after Vada was tucked beneath the patchwork and the house quieted, Vera stepped out onto the porch. The stars bore down in their quiet way, unbothered by the ache in her hands or the throb in her shoulders. Nolan joined her, 2 mugs in hand. He passed her one. Chamomile, he said, from the plant near the well. She took a sip. Didn't know it grew wild here, only in the shade. Most things don't take unless you know where to look. She looked past the fields, where the land darkened into hills. I've never stayed in one place this long. Feels strange. Feels like I'm waiting for the ground to shift. He leaned against the rail. You don't have to earn your place every day, Vera. She turned to him. That's how it's always been. Nolan didn't flinch from her gaze. Not here. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. I used to think quiet meant loneliness, she said. And now it feels like an answer. He stepped closer, not touching her, just near enough that she felt the warmth of him. I built this place for someone, he said. Didn't know it would take me this long to find her. Vera stared at the horizon, her voice low. I'm not soft-spoken. I don't have delicate hands. I don't want delicate. She turned to him, her heart thudding. Then what do you want? He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Someone who meets me in the middle, who stays when the weather turns and the fence line breaks. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. I've never been chosen without someone asking me to change, she whispered. I wouldn't know how to ask you that, he said. And I wouldn't want to. She stepped into him then, not hesitating, her palm resting flat against his chest. He kissed her again, slower this time, not like a promise but like a truth. When they pulled apart, she didn't look away. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I know, he replied. And with that, they stood together beneath the stars, the land folding quiet around them, the night stretching forward with no end in sight but one they'd walk towards side by side. The first snow came early that year, drifting in before the leaves had fully dropped from the cottonwoods. Vera stood at the hearth brushing flour from her hands as the wind pushed against the shutters. The cabin was warm from the stove's steady burn, and Vada sat near the fire, threading a needle through a scrap of blue muslin, tongue between her teeth in concentration. Nolan was in the shed sharpening the draw knife, the sound of steel against whetstone faint through the logs. Vera had offered to help, but he'd only nodded toward the window and said, she's near to finishing that square. Might want to be close when she does. Vera turned from the window now as Vada held up the finished piece. It's a horse, she said proudly. See the legs? Vera leaned down. Looks strong. Like the new one Papa traded for, Vada said. The one with the white blaze. Vera nodded. That gelding's got a fine gait. He'll hold up through the winter. Vada lowered her voice. Do you think he'd let me name it? You'll have to ask him, Vera said. But I think he'd be glad to hear your ideas. Vada grinned, then stood, clutching the fabric square to her chest. I'll wait till after supper. He's always in a better mood with stew. Vera laughed softly and the girl skipped off toward her room. Later, with the table cleared and the lamp turned low, Nolan leaned back in his chair, his fingers curled loosely around a tin mug. Vera sat across from him, her hands idle for once, elbows resting on the edge of the table. She wants to name the new horse, Vera said. I figured she might, he replied. She's taken to watching him like she's studying for an exam she made up herself. She's thorough. So's her teacher. Vera tilted her head, studying him. You never asked me why I left Boston. I figured you'd say when you were ready. I didn't run, she said. I just stopped waiting for someone else to decide if I was worth belonging. He didn't blink. I never figured you for someone who waited on others. I did for a time, she said. It wears a person down, being told they need to shrink before they're allowed to stay. Nolan set the mug down, the sound quiet but final. You don't need to be less of anything here. I know, she said. But sometimes I still brace for it. That moment someone tries to make me smaller. And then I remember where I am. Who I'm with. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers, his palm rough and warm. She didn't pull away. You belong, he said. Not because of what you do or what you change. Just because you're you. She looked at their hands, then up at his face. I don't know what to do with that kind of steadiness. You live with it, he said. You lean into it. Let it hold you up when your own strength wavers. She swallowed. What if mine doesn't? Then you hold me and we walk through the fire together. She stood slowly, drawing his hand with her, and he rose too, not releasing her touch. She stepped close, the table between them forgotten. I never thought I'd want to stay, she said. Not anywhere, not with anyone. And now, I want to build something that lasts, she said. Not because it's easy, but because it's ours. He nodded once, then reached for her waist, drawing her into the circle of his arms. She fit there without effort. No shrinking, no dimming. Just presence. Outside, the wind died down. The lantern cast long shadows against the walls and the wood in the stove settled with a soft pop. From the bedroom, a small voice called out, Did you name the horse yet? Nolan rested his forehead against Vera's, his voice low. Reckon we'll let her choose in the morning. Vera smiled. I think she's already decided. They stood together until the fire banked low, the quiet not empty but full of all the things they hadn't needed to say. And for the first time, Vera didn't feel like she was bracing for the world. She was part of it, and it was holding. The snow deepened by the week, softening the edges of the land, muffling hoofbeats and hammer strikes alike. Vera trudged through it in a borrowed coat of Nolan's, the cuffs turned once and still reaching her wrists. She carried a feed sack on her shoulder, boots sinking with each step as she crossed the yard to the lean to where the chickens huddled tight against the cold. She had never known a winter like this. In Massachusetts, snow came and went, ushered off by salt and sidewalk scrapers. Here it stayed, laying itself over the world like a second skin. And yet it didn't feel unfriendly. It felt earned, like the land reserving its quiet for those willing to stay through it. Inside the coop, she scattered grain, careful to keep her movements slow so as not to startle the hens. As she turned to leave, she caught sight of Nolan walking in from the barn, a wooden yoke over his shoulders, 2 full pails swinging from it. His gait was steady but cautious, his breath rising in the cold. "You're favoring your left," she said as he reached the porch. He set the pails down with a grunt. "Took a jolt from one of the yearlings yesterday. Didn't think it set in that deep. Let me see it." He raised an eyebrow. "I've wrapped worse," she said, tilting her chin toward the house. Inside, she had him sit on the chair closest to the stove. The warmth was slow to reach his shoulders as she knelt beside him and rolled up his trouser leg. Faint bruising spread across his calf, the muscle stiff beneath her fingers. "What did you wrap worse than this?" he asked. "My older brother's leg when he tried to jump a creek with a cider barrel strapped to his back." Nolan chuckled, careful not to shift. Why in God's name was he doing that? Wagered he could carry it across without spilling a drop. Made it halfway before he fell in. Did he win? Not a chance. She tore a strip from a linen rag and began winding it around his leg, her hand sure and slow. His eyes stayed on her face the whole time. "You ever think about leaving here?" he asked. "Not anymore. Even if the snow keeps you in for weeks? I've never minded the quiet." "What about the work? The pace?" She tied the wrap off and looked up. "You asking if I regret it?" "I'm asking what you want." She sat back on her heels. "I want to keep waking up with something worth doing. I want to watch Vada learn her own mind. And I want to build a life that fits not because I folded myself to it, but because it met me where I stood." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the wrapped legs stretching out stiffly. "I've been thinking about spring," he said. "About setting up another paddock, maybe putting in a small orchard." She looked at him, unsure where he was headed. "I can't run all this alone anymore," he said. "Not the way it's grown. And I don't want to." "Nolan, I'm not offering you another job," he said. "I'm offering a place beside me. Not behind. Not under. Beside." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I never planned on this," he said. "Didn't think the world held a woman like you. But it does. And she's sitting here with my coat on, fixing my leg like she's always done it." She rose slowly, the blood returning to her knees. "I need more than a promise of work," she said. "I'm not offering work." "Then say it plain." He stood, the wrapped leg bracing beneath him, and met her eyes without flinching. "Stay with me, Vera. Not for the winter, for the long haul. For the years and the years after that." She stepped forward until there was no space between them but breath. "I will," she said quietly. "But not because I was waiting for someone to choose me. I'm choosing this. Choosing you." He nodded once, a kind of reverence in it. Outside, the wind had stilled, and the sun threw long gold across the snow. In the bedroom, Vada's voice drifted out, humming to a tune only she knew. "You'll need to tell her," Vera said. "She's been waiting to hear it," Nolan replied. They stood in the hush of the cabin, close enough to feel each other breathe, and the shape of what they were building took root in the quiet. Not a beginning, not exactly, but something just as rare. A life rising slow and steady, meant to last. The thaw came slowly, not in sudden melts, but in small surrenders. The creek breaking open in ribbons, the icicles shortening by inches, the wind shifting from bitter to brisk. Vera marked the changes in her ledger, not out of habit, but because the rhythm of the place had become hers. She'd begun keeping a second column notes on soil softness, bird calls returning, the first green at the base of the cottonwoods. Nolan teased her for it once, half smiling as she ran her finger down the page. "You planning to outsmart the seasons now?" "I'm planning to meet them better prepared," she said, not looking up. He didn't tease her again. Vada spent the warming days with her boots off, trailing behind the hens and naming the new foal that came in early March. They'd found the mare laboring just before dawn, and Nolan had carried the filly to the stall himself, his coat still damp from the sleet. The girl had chosen the name quiet and quick Brindle, for the dark streak down her muzzle. "You think she'll stay small?" she asked Vera later, watching the foal wobble against her mother. "I think she'll grow stronger than she looks," Vera said. "Some things do." The shed became her domain after that. She helped clean tack, sorted feed, and once, under Nolan's careful eye, led Brindle in a slow circle on a rope. Vera watched from the fence rail, her heart tugged by something she didn't have words for. One evening, after supper and the washing up, Vera stepped out to the porch with a soft cloth in hand and began oiling her boots. Nolan joined her, carrying a folded paper he'd brought from town while picking up seed sacks. He handed it to her without a word. Inside was a deed updated, notarized, her name beside his on the property lines. She looked up sharply. "You didn't ask me." "I didn't need to," he said. "You've already built more here than I ever did alone." She traced the seal with her thumb. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure about you." Vera folded the paper neatly and set it on the bench. "It's not just the land," she said. "It's the life that lives on it. The people." "I know. And you're not afraid I'll leave someday?" He leaned his shoulder against the post, eyes steady. "You don't carry that kind of restlessness." "I used to." "You don't anymore." She nodded once, then looked toward the yard, where dusk settled over the fields and the chimney smoke curled soft into the sky. "There's something else," she said. "I've been thinking about applying for a land teaching license. There's a schoolhouse past the ridge that only opens after harvest. They need someone steady, someone who knows how to keep a room and a fire going." He didn't blink. "You want it." "I want Vada to see me stand for something beyond this fence line. I want her to know she can be more than what people expect." Nolan reached for her hand. "Then you'll do it." "You think it's foolish?" "I think it's right." She breathed out slow, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "You always knew how to speak exactly enough." "I've had good practice." They stood that way until the stars came out. That spring, they built a second coop and cleared a patch of land for rows of beans and carrots. Vera ordered a new plow blade from Cheyenne, one she'd read about in a circular that promised better yield with less drag. It arrived on the freight wagon mid-April, and she fitted it herself, Vada handing her bolts and wrenches without being asked. By early summer, the schoolhouse confirmed her post 3 months' work with room for Vada to sit in on lessons. She walked the ridge each morning, the wind lifting her skirt hem, and returned in the evening with chalk dust on her palms and stories of pupils who learned their letters with stubborn pride. Nolan met her at the fence most evenings, Brindle grown bold enough to follow him without a rope. They were married in late July, standing in the shade of the cottonwoods with Vada between them, a string of wildflowers in her hair. There was no preacher, just the clerk from town, who read the vows slow and clear, and a few neighbors who came with pie and strong coffee. Vera wore a dress she'd sewn herself from a bolt of dusky green calico. Nolan wore his Sunday shirt, freshly pressed, and boots she'd polished without him knowing. After the papers were signed and the guests wandered off, Nolan took her hand and led her back to the porch. "You remember the first time you stood here?" he asked. "You told me you weren't looking for a bride. I wasn't. And now? I'm not looking anymore. She drew his hand to her chest, pressing it over the place that had unknotted in his presence. I came to Wyoming thinking I might never belong, she said. But this land, it doesn't ask you to be anything other than what you are. It just waits to see if you'll stay. I hope you do. I will. Always. He kissed her then, not like before, not with the doubt or the ache or the wondering if this could hold. He kissed her like a man who had weathered enough seasons to know what was worth tending. Inside the house, Vada curled up on the settee with a book, her feet tucked under a blanket Vera had quilted through long winter nights. The stove was cool now, the windows open to the evening breeze, and the scent of fresh hay drifted in from the barn. The house, the land, the people, they were not perfect. But they were strong, kind, steady. And Vera, who had once been told she was too much, too loud, too tall, stood at the center of it all, fully herself, fully loved, and without a single piece of herself left behind. The world hadn't softened for her, but it had made room.